As you know, the world is a dumpster fire right now, and I really wanted to do something constructive at this moment. I'm just really tired of being useless. Now you might wonder, why is an Indian doing this video? And there are a couple of reasons for it. For one thing, I don't think it's correct that if you have a voice or a platform, then you will only use it when you're the one who needs help. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to amplify and to stand in solidarity with anybody, anywhere who requires our support. But on a more personal level, when I was a very young, very privileged young woman, I moved to the United States, and I feel like I owe a debt to Black writers and intellectuals, because it is by reading and understanding and learning about race relations in the United States that I really first understood the term structural injustice and how oppression works on the minutest societal levels. And over the years, it's helped me understand so much about my own country. And if I today count myself as an ally to Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasi people in my country, then it's because I had the good fortune to be friends with African Americans and to read Black literature. And lastly, I feel like a lot of us who are not American but still engage with American culture, a lot of that is actually Black American culture, and I don't think we talk about that enough or appreciate that enough. Whether it's music or dance or film or fashion or even, so much of internet slang is actually African American vernacular English, and I don't think people really stop and think about that. And so here are a few reads that were published fairly recently. This is not like a classical primer on racism or anything like that. This is just a selection of books that have been published in the past few years, and I think have a lot to contribute to the current conversation around the Black Lives Matter movement and racism in general in the United States, but also they will make you think about other forms of injustice and oppression in other parts of the world, and the conscious or unconscious roles that we all play in it. So first up is the book So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo, who is one of my favorite culture writers. I'm going to link to her website down below, where you have links to other pieces of work that she's done, and I think it's not too much of an exaggeration to say that she's one of the best cultural essayists that are working in the United States today. She's funny and informed, and this book really looks at the different facets of structural injustice in the United States. In many ways, this is a call to action because it lays out the different facets of the issue. So there's a feeling that, if somebody calls you the N-word, or if somebody refuses to hire you for a position, then that is racism. And that is definitely one kind of racism. But as she puts out in her book, there are so many little structural things, everyday societal issues that can be fixed, but it requires collective action. This is the kind of book that you can read and then you can just pass on to your friends and family, and literally there are so many different conversations that this book can provoke. And I love it because it looks at things from a macro level while also giving you stories at a micro level. So there's empathy, but there's also a sense that these are not insurmountable odds, and that there are things that we can do as ordinary human beings to make life better for all of us. She also gave a reading and like a Q&A session at, I think it was Google, but I'm going to link down below, and you can check that out and you can see what she's talking about, and it's a really good example of her voice. The next book is actually written by a Black British author, and I'm including it in this list because it kind of works in my mind as a kind of complement or in conjunction with Oluo's book. It's called Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Reni, Eddo-Lodge. And it sounds quite incendiary by the title, but honestly, it's just a very simple proposition. She says that when black people and non-black people, especially white people, are talking about racism, they're usually coming from such different standpoints. Black people understand the structural nature of racism, and she makes a distinction between structural and institutionalized forms of racism. It's worth reading the entire thing, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. Instead, I'm going to leave a link to an excerpt that she published in The Guardian. She basically says that the onus is upon non-black people, and specifically white people, to educate themselves and to do the work and to listen to people of color and to black people when they're talking about the racism that they experience on an everyday level. And what is that they mean when they say that racism is structural. And honestly, there's a lot of things that she says that I absolutely agree with. One of the things being that you have to put in the time and the work to research, to find your own sources, to sift through them, to critically engage with them and to think rather than find something that confirms your biases. And have conversations, difficult conversations. The structures and the institutions that she's talking about, we are those structures and we are those institutions. So these are conversations that we ought to be having with ourselves. Reni, Eddo-Lodge also has a podcast that's basically based on the same concept. I don't know if she's still doing it, but I'm going to leave a link down below. Next up is a book that pretty much everybody was talking about. It's Ta-Nehisi Coates's We Were 8 Years in Power. And this is a collection of essays that he wrote during the Obama presidency, but also it's sort of like a retrospective about what happened during those years. Now, I've been reading TNC for years, from back in the day when he was a new hire at The Atlantic. And, The Atlantic is a very old establishment magazine and it's pretty white. And then TNC came along and he was such a fresh voice. And if you've never read him, his prose is amazing. It's almost like prose poetry at some points, the way he engages with language, and he's entirely self-taught. And he is one of the most original voices in America today. Perhaps the most famous essay in the collection is called The Case for Reparations, which was published in The Atlantic, and I'm going to link down below to it, and that'll give you a good idea of the kind of writing that he does. He talks about issues at a personal level, but he also talks about it in a historical context, and all of it is just beautiful. And it's designed to provoke debate. He also wrote an issue of Black Panther that basically sold out within minutes. It's an iconic issue, and if you can find a copy of it, then you should absolutely buy that one as well. The last recommended book is They Were Her Property: White Women as Slaveholders in the American South by Stephanie Jones Rogers. I remember when this book came out because it went off like a rocket in my timeline. I think over the past few years, there's been a sort of greater emphasis and scrutiny about intersectionality in feminism. And part of it is that white women have played a role in upholding structural racism in the United States, and that isn't discussed enough. The intersectionality between gender and race, and in my own case, the intersectionality between gender and caste, is perhaps one of the more uncomfortable discussions that we can have as a community, because this is something that women need to come to terms with. This is something that we need to spend time coming to terms with and interrogating and understanding about ourselves. So many of us understand the problems with patriarchy and how patriarchy has hurt us, but we don't talk about how women are co-opted into the patriarchy and about how we become tools in upholding oppression. So for the longest time, there was this feeling white women were too fragile to understand the specifics of slavery and just how evil it was. And what this book does is basically blows the lid off that notion, because as women, we know that we are not too fragile to deal with unpleasant things or to enact unpleasant things. Again, Stephanie Jones-Rogers did a reading, and I'm going to link down below so you can hear her as well. I want to point out that all the people that I have discussed in this video today are people whose work I have followed for years. They're not people that I just picked off a shelf. I've put in the time and the effort to listen to them over the years, and the reason I bought their books is because I wanted to educate myself. So I want to thank you for watching this video, and I hope that it has been of help to you. But I also want to point out that, these 4 books or however many books that you read, that's not going to change anything. If you really want to make a difference, and if you're here because you want to educate yourself, you have to put in the time and the effort. And honestly, that sounds like I'm giving you homework, but that's not it at all. I think that these are people whose ideas enrich us and whose ideas, if we engage with them in the right spirit, because a lot of people engage with them in a spirit of let's find out what's wrong with it. And that's not helpful. Read these books with clarity and with purpose and a willingness to listen. And you don't have to agree with everything that's written in these books. It's fine if you don't, but you have to engage with it at an intellectually honest level. And also, follow these people on social media. They're just really good people to follow. I can't even begin to tell you the amount of interesting information that has come my way since I began to follow them and other people. Diversify your feed. We're all here because we love to read, but what good is reading if we can't cultivate empathy? We read because we want to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. We want to understand how they feel. And we're not doing a favor to them by doing that. We are enriching ourselves. So lastly, all I want to say is donate. If you have the means to do that at this point in time, I know times are hard and not everybody has the means, but if you do, skip that cup of coffee and check out one of the links below. For more videos, please hit the subscribe button.